League of Legends has over 160 champions, and somehow the community has found a reason to despise almost every single one of them. But some champions aren't just disliked, they're genuinely hated with a passion that has lasted for years. So today I'm breaking down every single one of the most hated champions in League and exactly why they make people lose their minds. Starting with the obvious one, Teemo. Teemo is the original community punching bag, and the weird part is nobody can fully explain why they hate him so much, which is exactly what makes him so infuriating. Here's the thing, Teemo doesn't look threatening. He's a small Yordle with a blowgun. He looks like a stuffed animal you'd win at a carnival. But this tiny rat has been tilting players since the early days of League, and his kit is specifically designed to make you suffer without him even being on your screen. His passive lets him go invisible and grants up to 80% bonus attack speed when he breaks stealth. That means the first auto after he appears hits like a freight train with zero warning. But that's not even the real problem. The mushrooms are the real psychological weapon. Experienced Teemo players place them in every high traffic choke point, every river path, every dragon approach, specifically to make you second guess every single step you take. You're not fighting Teemo, you're fighting the map itself. The community labels Teemo as low counterplay, but not because he's overpowered. He punishes your mistakes without being present. You don't tilt at a player, you tilt at a mushroom. And that's a special kind of hatred that no amount of nerfs will ever fix. But if you think a tiny Yordle with mushrooms is annoying, wait until you meet the fish that literally cannot be hit, Shaco. Here's the thing about Shaco. Nobody can agree on what he actually is. Some players call him one of the highest skill ceiling champions in the game. Others say he's just a walking collection of bugs held together by duct tape and copium. And the uncomfortable truth? Both sides are completely right. Let me explain. Shaco's entire early game is basically a scripted sequence. You place your first box at exactly 51 seconds, stack them with precise timing, and your jungle clear happens on autopilot. If the enemy jungler doesn't know the exact window to invade, they have zero counterplay, none. You either know the timing or you lose. That's not really a skill matchup. That's a knowledge check disguised as gameplay. But here's where it gets genuinely absurd. There's a bug that has been documented for over a decade, and it's still in the game right now. When Shaco's clone procs Hail of Blades, the clone doesn't reset the attack speed buff, it just keeps it permanently. We're talking 2.21 or higher attack speed on a clone that's supposed to be a distraction tool. High elo Shaco, mains like Pink Ward, actively build around this interaction in Season 15. They're not hiding it, everyone knows. This bug enables solo Baron secures. That would be statistically impossible without it. The clone just stands there shredding Baron like a 6-item ADC while the real Shaco watches. And Riot has not fixed it across multiple full seasons. Let that sink in. And that's exactly why the community bans Shaco. It's not because he kills you in a 1v1. It's because fighting him is a psychological war. You don't know which one is real. You don't know which one has the permanent attack speed bug. And you genuinely cannot tell if the person playing him is a mechanical genius or someone who just memorized a broken interaction and is letting the bugs do the heavy lifting. But if you think an invisible clown with a decade-old exploit is frustrating, wait until you meet the champion whose entire identity is pressing one button and refusing to die. Yasuo. Yasuo has been in this game for over a decade, and somehow the conversation about him has never changed, not once. And here's the thing, the hatred isn't really about Yasuo as a champion. It's about one ability, one single ability that the community has treated like a war crime since 2013, Wind Wall. On paper it sounds reasonable. Yasuo places a wall that blocks all projectiles for 4 seconds. Cool, defensive tool. Every champion needs one, right? But all projectiles is doing some incredibly heavy lifting in that description, because all projectiles means if you're playing Nami, your entire ultimate just vanishes. If you're Ashe, your engage arrow hits a wall and ceases to exist. If you're Lux, your final spark, the ability your entire kit revolves around, just stops. For 4 seconds, your champion doesn't have abilities anymore. You're just standing there. But here's where it gets truly infuriating. Wind Wall doesn't just block projectiles, it deletes them. Your cooldowns are gone, your mana is spent, and absolutely nothing comes out the other side. Yasuo doesn't need to angle the wall correctly. He doesn't need to read the fight or predict the trajectory. He presses W and every single projectile that touches that wall just ceases to exist. You get outplayed by an ability that requires zero precision from the person using it. Now stack that on top of the rest of his kit. His passive doubles his crit chance, meaning a single Infinity Edge gives him the power spike most champions need 2 items to reach. His E dashes through any non-champion target with no cooldown, so he's permanently sliding through minion waves like the lane is a slip and slide. And the community consensus isn't even that Yasuo is overpowered. That's what makes this so exhausting. Nobody's saying he wins too much. They're saying Wind Wall removes entire champion kits from the game. It makes certain matchups feel completely unwinnable at the interaction level. You don't tilt at a Yasuo for killing you. You tilt at a Yasuo for making your champion feel pointless. There's a difference, and it's been the same difference for over 10 years. But if Yasuo makes your abilities disappear, wait until you meet the champion that makes you disappear. Yon, you'd think after years of the community losing their minds over Yasuo, Riot would learn their lesson. You'd think they'd look at the forums, the Reddit threads, the millions of ban clicks, and say, okay, maybe we don't do that again. Instead, they released Yone. And Yone is literally Yasuo with 2 swords and a decade of power creep baked into his kit. Let me explain how lazy this gets. Yone's passive grants doubled crit chance, the exact same mechanic that made Yasuo the most controversial champion in the game for years. Riot looked at the single most complained about passive in league history and copy-pasted it onto a brand new champion. His Q is a 3-part combo with dual sword scaling that functions almost identically to Yasuo's, just with more damage, because of course it does. He was released nearly 7 years after Yasuo, and somehow the design team thought, yeah, let's just do it again, but better. But here's where Yone actually outpaces his brother. His W applies max health percentage damage, meaning he shreds tanks in a way Yasuo never could. Yasuo struggles into beefy front lines. Yone doesn't care. He has a wider viable target pool while sitting on the same broken crit foundation. And then there's his E, Soul Unbound. Yone sends his spirit forward with ramping movement speed, deals damage, then snaps back to his body and reapplies a percentage of all the damage he dealt during the cast. It's basically Zed's ultimate, but with significantly more repositioning freedom and way less counterplay. You can't even punish the snapback reliably because the window is so tight. The frustration with Yone isn't that he's unbeatable, it's that he's Yasuo's most hated features, reskinned into a champion that does more things, covers more matchups, and was released as though the community hadn't spent years screaming about the original. Players don't ban Yone because he's overpowered, they ban him out of principle. But if you think a copy-paste kit is frustrating, wait until you meet a champion whose entire design philosophy is press one button and remove someone from the game. Yuumi, 28 patches. Let that number sink in for a second. Most champions in League of Legends get a handful of balance adjustments across their entire lifespan. Yuumi got 28 hotfixes and balance passes across 3 years, and she's still considered a design failure. That's not a balance problem. That's a 3-year patch war that ended in a philosophical stalemate. Here's the thing. The issue with Yuumi was never her numbers. You can nerf damage, you can adjust healing ratios, you can gut cooldowns. Riot did all of that repeatedly. But the core problem is something numbers can't fix. Yuumi is untargetable for roughly 70% of any given game. The fundamental counterplay to every enchanter support in League is the same. Punish their positioning. Soraka steps too far forward, you kill her. Lulu mispositions in a team fight, she's dead. Yuumi simply removes positioning from her own gameplay loop entirely. She sits on a teammate and becomes unhittable. That's not a tuning issue, that's a design conflict, and the competitive scene proved it. At 2 consecutive Worlds tournaments, Yuumi hit near 100% pick ban rate. She didn't just warp games, she warped entire competitive seasons around her existence. Teams weren't drafting around team compositions anymore. They were drafting around whether Yuumi was available. But here's where it gets even worse. Her passive allows stat scaling from whatever ally she's attached to, meaning a Yuumi who's 0 and 10, who has done literally nothing nothing all game, can attach to a fed carry and convert that champion's gold value into her own personal stats. She doesn't earn them. The mechanic just transfers them. Zero skill required. A community poll with over 1,000 votes named Yuumi the single most hated champion ever released. Not most overpowered, most hated. And even Riot publicly acknowledged they couldn't solve her through patching alone, citing her untargetability as a fundamental design conflict that no amount of number changes could address. The community didn't just complain about Yuumi, they convinced Riot to admit the champion might be unfixable. But if Yuumi broke the game through bad design, the next champion on this list broke it through sheer overloaded power. K'Sante is probably the most interesting champion on this list, because the community doesn't hate him for being brain dead. They hate him for being too smart. Here's the thing. K'Sante is a tank. He builds tank items. He absorbs damage. He peels for his team. That's the deal. That's the contract you agree to when you see him locked in. But then he presses R and the contract gets shredded in front of your face. His ultimate, all out, literally strips away his tank stats and transforms him into a full melee duelist mid-fight. 1 second he's soaking damage for his team, the next he's diving your backline with a completely different stat profile, semi-untargetable, outputting damage that no tank should ever be capable of. The dopamine rush for K'Sante players is enormous. For everyone else, it feels like you got cheated. His W Pathmaker generates the same crowd psychology as Yasuo's Wind Wall. It's a defensive commitment ability that looks visually dramatic and produces instant reactions from spectators and teammates alike. The difference is K'Sante follows it up by becoming an entirely different champion. But here's where the numbers get absurd. The number 1 K'Sante player in Korea holds an 89.8% win rate. Meanwhile, the average K'Sante player sits at roughly 45.6%. That gap is wider than almost any champion in the entire game. You're literally playing a different character depending on whether you've mastered him or not. This is exactly why competitive teams prioritized him in pick/ban rotations through 2023 and 2024. Not because he was statistically broken in traditional ways, but because All Out creates win conditions that are genuinely impossible to plan around in a structured draft environment. How do you draft against a tank that stops being a tank at the exact moment it matters most? K'Sante isn't hated because he's unfair. He's hated because he breaks the one rule every tank is supposed to follow. But if you think bending the rules of your own class is frustrating, wait until you meet the champion that broke the rules of the entire game. Miel. Here's something that should tell you everything you need to know about Mel. Faker, the greatest League of Legends player to ever live, picked her in a professional match. And the community didn't cheer. They didn't clip it. They got angry. Because when Faker plays a champion and nobody can tell whether the play was impressive or the kit is just doing everything for him, something has gone fundamentally wrong with the design. Mel hit a 40% ban rate shortly after her release. For context, most of the champions on this list have never sustained that kind of ban presence consistently. Mel matched it before her first anniversary on the Rift. Riot applied nerfs within 2 days of her going live, which is an almost unheard of response time. That alone tells you how loud the community was screaming. But here's the thing, the nerfs didn't fix the actual problem. The specific mechanic that broke people was her shield reflection. Mel's W rebuttal puts up a barrier that reflects projectiles back toward their original source. Yes, the player has to activate it, but the window is so generous and the reflection itself is completely automatic once it's up. You throw a skill shot, it comes back at you, and there is practically zero counterplay. The projectile simply returns. That's it. And that's not even the worst part. Her passive execution on minions enables gold generation that the community straight up called a cheat code. Wave manipulation that felt completely outside what a mid lane mage is supposed to access at that level. She wasn't just winning fights, she was winning the economy of the lane before fights even started. The Faker moment really is the perfect summary. League has always celebrated mechanical gods doing impossible things, but Mel made it impossible to separate player skill from champion design. When the benchmark for human excellence picks your champion and the reaction is frustration instead of awe, you haven't just made a hated champion, you've made one that undermines the entire point of competition. competition. But if you think Mel's design philosophy was controversial, wait until we talk about the one champion that broke competitive league so badly that Riot had to patch her more times than any champion in history. Malzahar. Malzahar doesn't outplay you. He schedules the exact moment where you're not allowed to play the game. And that's not an exaggeration. That's literally his entire design philosophy. Here's how it works. His Q, Call of the Void, silences you for 1.25 seconds. That's the window where you normally flash, activate Zhonya's, or pop any defensive tool in your kit. But you can't. You're silenced. And before that silence even ends, he's already pressing R. Nether Grasp suppresses you for 2.5 seconds, locking you in place while his Voidlings and Malefic Visions eat you alive. By the time you regain control of your character, you're either dead or so low that a single auto attack finishes the job. But here's where it gets genuinely insulting. His passive Void Shift grants him a spell shield that refreshes every 30 to 12 seconds, depending on level. Sounds reasonable until you learn the fine print. The shield triggers even when the incoming damage is fully mitigated. Read that again. You can hit Malzahar with an ability that deals 0 actual damage, and his spell shield still activates, still absorbs it, and still starts its cooldown to come back. The shield doesn't care whether the ability would have hurt him. It just refreshes anyway, maintaining a free defensive layer that costs him absolutely nothing. No mana, no cooldown trade, no decision making. It just exists. And then there's his Voidlings. The little creatures spawn through his W skill with 200% bonus damage against minions infected by his E. They inherit spell effects from auto attacks, enabling vision denial and surprise CC interactions that opponents never see coming, because nobody respects the Voidlings. Until 3 of them are chewing through your health bar while you're suppressed and silenced. High elo players don't ban Malzahar because he's mechanically complex. They ban him because his entire kit is designed to remove your ability to respond. The silence prevents your cooldowns. The suppression removes your movement. The passive absorbs your follow-up. He doesn't need to read the situation. He just presses R on whoever is closest and the interaction's over. Brain off, kill secured. And if you think that level of frustration is unique to Malzahar, wait until you meet a champion who doesn't even need to choose a playstyle to ruin your day. Fizz. Fizz is the ghost story League players tell each other to this day, even though the monster died years ago. Back in 2016 and 2017, Fizz wasn't just annoying. He was a genuine menace. We're talking a 60% ban rate, over 15% pick rate in high elo, and a tank build that broke the fundamental rules of how League of Legends is supposed to work. You could build Fizz full tank, become literally unkillable, and still one-shot squishies. That's not an exaggeration. Tank Fizz could delete your ADC while regenerating health through his itemization, and there was nothing you could do about it. And the reason was his E Playful/Trickster. This single ability dodges approximately 98 to 99% of all targetable abilities in the entire game. Not some abilities, not most abilities, almost everything. During the Tank Fizz era, this meant he could hop over your entire burst window, land on you, chunk half your health bar with base damage alone, and then just walk away, regenerating. You'd blow every cooldown you had, and he'd just hop repeatedly, indefinitely. Riot eventually brought the hammer down hard enough that Fizz's win rate tanked and the tank build vanished from viability. The community celebrated, the nightmare was over. But here's the twist. Modern Fizz sits around a 49.2% win rate. That's balanced, that's borderline underutilized. And while Riot has tweaked him multiple times since then, reworking his W, adjusting his ultimate, tuning his health and mana growth, none of those changes brought back the terror of Tank Fizz. The meta simply evolved away from the conditions that made him oppressive. Yet players still flinch when they see him locked in. And honestly, they're not entirely wrong to. That E is still in his kit, untouched, still dodging 98% of everything you throw at him. The difference between an average Fizz and a challenger Fizz is terrifying, because a challenger Fizz still erases people like it's 2016 all over again. The mechanical ceiling hasn't moved. Fizz is the historical example of a champion the community burned to the ground, watched Riot rebuild from scratch, and still still reflexively fears, even when every single number says he's fine. The ban rate memory outlasted the actual threat. The trauma is permanent even if the danger isn't. But if you think a lingering fear response is bad, wait until we talk about a champion whose entire design philosophy was to remove your ability to interact with the game entirely. Kayn. Kayn isn't one champion. He's two completely different nightmares wearing the same skin. And you won't know which one you're fighting until it's already too late to do anything about it. Here's the thing. Most champions in League have a defined identity. You see them in Champ Select. You understand the threat. You build accordingly. Kayn throws that entire system in the trash. His transformation mechanic means he either becomes Shadow Assassin, a blue form with 40% bonus movement speed, ghost status, and the ability to walk through terrain for 1.5 seconds, or he becomes Raced, a red form drain tank that heals for 25% of post-mitigation spell damage dealt to enemy champions. These two forms require completely opposite counter strategies, and the choice is made before you ever get a chance to adjust your itemization. But here's where it gets frustrating. Kayn's form isn't even really a choice in the traditional sense. His transformation is determined by whether he's hitting melee or ranged champions during the early jungle phase. A Kayn player can have their entire game identity locked in by minute 6 based on which lanes they ganked and which champions they auto-attacked. There's zero ability to reverse that decision. No undo button, no flexibility. The form is set and you just have to deal with it. Shadow Assassin Kayn resets his passive, the Darkened Scythe, on champion exit and gains 200 bonus range, meaning he can burst you down, pop out, and immediately have his passive damage ready for the next target in the same extended fight. That's not a single pick threat. That's a repeating execution machine. And then there's Ghast, because his healing scales off spell damage against champions. Ghast in extended team fights can sustain through absurd amounts of punishment. We're talking thousands and thousands of health recovered while simultaneously being the primary damage dealer, because his healing synergizes with bonus health itemization. He's a bruiser, a tank, and a carry all at once. Players don't hate Kayn because he's broken. They hate him because there is literally no single counter strategy that works. You prepare for the assassin, he goes Rest. You stack armor and health, he goes blue and deletes your backline through a wall. And nothing in the game tells you which one is coming until he walks through terrain and it's already over. If you think invisible decision trees are bad, wait until you meet a champion whose entire design philosophy was controversial from day one. Akali, every other champion on this list, is hated because of what they do to you. Akali is hated because of what was done to her. Here's the thing, Akali's community isn't angry at opponents. They're angry at Riot Games. And honestly, they have receipts. Since her rework, Akali has been hit with 7 separate nerfs. Not small tweaks, not number adjustments. 7 systematic removals of the mechanical pillars that defined her entire identity. Akali mains didn't just lose power. They lost a champion they spent hundreds of hours mastering. Let me walk you through the damage. Her W stealth timer, the core mechanic that made Shroud plays possible, has been lengthened repeatedly. The timer scales based on game time elapsed, starting at 1 full second early in the match and shrinking down to 0.625 seconds as the game progresses. Each decimal point represents a separate nerf pass. Akali players can recite these numbers from memory like a grievance ledger, because that's exactly what it is. But the re-stealth timer was just the beginning. When Akali gets immobilized inside her shroud now, she's revealed for the full CC duration. Movement speed decay was added to the shroud itself, gutting her repositioning. And her ultimate was changed from target agnostic to target locked, completely removing the clutch wall hop mechanic that defined high elo Akali play for years. Read that again. Riot specifically removed skill expression from a champion to address counterplay concerns. That almost never happens in this game. Usually they add counterplay without stripping mechanics. With Akali, they chose demolition over renovation. And here's where it gets complicated. Despite hovering around a 49% win rate, one-trick Akali players still maintain viability at the highest levels of play. That means the champion isn't actually weak. She's just brutally unforgiving for for anyone who hasn't committed their entire league career to mastering her. The skill floor didn't just rise, it went through the ceiling. So now you have this rare situation where both sides are furious at completely different targets. Akali opponents still feel like she has too much going on inside that shroud. Too slippery, too frustrating, too many tools. Meanwhile, Akali mains feel like the champion they invested everything into has been methodically hollowed out, patch by patch, until only the skeleton remains. She managed to alienate her own fanbase and her opponents simultaneously. Nobody else on this list pulled that off. But if you think a champion being slowly dismantled by its own developers is frustrating, wait until you meet the champion whose entire design philosophy is refusing to die. Tryndamere. Tryndamere is the oldest champion on this list, the simplest champion on this list, and somehow in 2026 is still the one capable of making a full lobby put their keyboards down. His ultimate grants 5 seconds of invulnerability. That's been true since launch. The ability itself hasn't changed. What's changed is everything around it. Profane Hydra into Navori Quick Blade reduces his ultimate cooldown so aggressively that the invulnerability window becomes functionally permanent in extended teamfights. Not hard to kill, not high sustain. Permanent invulnerability, and I can prove it. In arena mode, a properly built Tryndamere maintained invulnerability for over 10 consecutive seconds. 10 seconds of literal, mechanical, cannot die invulnerability in a live game environment. That's not a theory. That's not an exaggeration. That happened. But here's where it gets worse. Lethal Tempo builds push his attack speed past 80% mid-fight. Infinity Edge converts his Fury stacked crit into raw AD at multiplicative rates. His one-shot window against non-tank champions is under 1 second. So let's be clear about what this champion does. He cannot die. He kills you in under a second. Those are not qualities that should coexist in one kit, and they have coexisted in one kit for over a decade. Here's the thing. People dismiss Tryndamere as a right-click simulator, but high-level Tryndamere players maintain 55% or higher win rates. That brain-dead label is covering for genuine mechanical depth that most players never encounter because they tilt out of the game before they ever see it. The community calls Tryndamere anti-fun rather than overpowered, and that is the most precise description possible. He doesn't win by being complex. He wins by making the moment of his death impossible to schedule and the moment of your death impossible to avoid. He's been doing this since the game launched. He is still doing it right now. The oldest, simplest champion on this list, and genuinely one of the most mentally corrosive to play against. A perfect note to end on. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the most disturbing characters in League of Legends explained, click the video on the screen now.